Good morning. We are glad you are here, congregant or visitor. I'm Deborah Freeman, today's worship associate. And if I'm squinting at you, it's because the sun is really bright in my eyes. But I'm not complaining. I'm happy to see the sun. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, however you identify, you are welcome in our faith community. If you're visiting here in the sanctuary, welcome. If you're visiting online, we invite you to introduce yourself in the chat and tell us from where you are watching. We're glad you're here. We are grateful for the presence of our music director, Les Downs, and our AV tech, Simon Jacobs. Our guest minister today is the Reverend Dr. Neil Jones. Neil Jones is a psychologist at the Pisgah Institute here in Asheville. Born and raised in North Carolina, he earned his BA in political science from Wake Forest University, his Master's of Divinity from Southeastern Seminary, and his psychology doctorate from Baylor University. He has served as the minister of 5 congregations in North and South Carolina, Texas, and Pennsylvania, most recently at Mainline Unitarian Church near Philadelphia. He has also served as the chair of the National Board of Trustees of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Neil teaches and practices a spirituality of personal wholeness, relational respect, and social justice. Now let us prepare for worship with today's centering music. Thank you, Les. In these hard times, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. Today we are lighting a second chalice in memory of Elaine Stennett, who attended our congregation regularly in the 90s and early 2000s, along with her husband, Dick, who survives her.
Our opening words are from novelist and minister Frederick Buechner, who writes, "After lecturing learnedly on miracles, a great theologian was asked to give a specific example of one. 'There is only one miracle,' he answered. 'It is life.' Have you wept at anything during this past year? Has your heart beat faster at the sight of beauty? Have you thought seriously about the fact that someday you're going to die? More often than not, do you really listen when people are speaking to you instead of just waiting your turn to speak? Is there anybody you know in whose place, if one of you had to suffer great pain, you would volunteer yourself? If your answer to all or most of these questions is no, chances are you're dead." And now let us rise in body or spirit as we sing our opening hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life. Thank you. Please be seated. And now it's time for our children's story. I'm going to come join you guys. I've got a story for you. No, I really do. We can get back to that. By the way, I want to thank Simon for showing the pictures of our story on the screen so everyone can see the pictures. The title of today's story is Ron's Big Adventure. This is a true story about a fellow named Ron McNair that some members of our audience may know, and I'll tell you who he is after the story. But this is a story that was set back a long time ago in the 1950s. Now, even though that was a little before my time, when I was your age, our country, yeah, I was, believe it or not, our country practiced something called segregation. Segregation. What does that mean? To segregate means to separate. And believe it or not, at one time in this country, we used to separate black people from white people. Black people and white people lived in separate neighborhoods. Black children and white children went to separate schools. When you'd go out in public, black people and white people would use separate public restrooms. Oh, good for you. And separate water fountains. Some restaurants had separate seating places for black customers and white customers. Some restaurants would not even serve black people, but made them come around outside to the kitchen to pick up their food to take it home, and wouldn't even let them eat in the restaurant. I know. It's hard to believe, isn't it? And some places in the town I grew up in eastern North Carolina, the theater would make black people, all the black people sit in the balcony, and only white people would sit on the floor level. Yeah. And in some places, libraries would not allow black people to check out books, which brings us to this true story about a young man named Ron McNair who grew up in Lake City, South Carolina. Now, Lake City is anything but a city. It's a small town out in the middle of nowhere between Columbia and Myrtle Beach, way out in the country. That's where Ron McNair grew up, and this is a true story. Remember now, he grew up during the days of segregation. Forgot, this requires glasses. See what you got to look forward to? Well, you're up early this morning, Ron. What's the rush? Asked Ms. McNair. Come and have your breakfast. I've made us some oatmeal. I have to go, Mama, said Ron, tying his sneakers. I have something to do this morning. You always have something to do, said his mother with a smile. Just be home by lunchtime, okay? Ron was 9 years old. That morning he left his house with a plan. He'd been thinking about it for a long time. It was a beautiful South Carolina summer day, and Ron looked up at the blue sky. Someday, he thought, he'd be up there flying a plane. He wanted to be a pilot when he grew up. But today, Ron had something else on his mind, something very important. Down by the schoolyard, Ron saw his friend Carl shooting baskets. All right, you made it, called Carl. Hi, Carl, said Ron. I wish I could stay, but I've got something important to do. More important than basketball and summer vacation, said Carl. Are you kidding? Ron laughed. He loved to play basketball, but not today. Today was too important. Ron kept on walking. When Ron got to the Lake City Public Library, he stopped. This was it. He was hot from walking so fast, and he was nervous too. He took a deep breath, lifted his head high, and went inside. Mrs. Scott was busy getting ready for all the people who'd be using the library today. As the head librarian, she had to make sure that everything was neat and orderly. Mrs. Scott looked up to welcome her first visitor of the day. She smiled as Ron walked in. He was her best customer. Ron gave a little wave to Miss Scott and went to the bookshelves. It took Ron a while to find some books. He always looked for books that showed children who looked like him, but that was hard because there weren't many books about black kids on the shelves. At last, Ron found some books on airplanes. He took the books and started to walk to the front desk. Ron felt nervous, and his hand felt a little sweaty, but he knew what he wanted to do. Mrs. Fielding, a white lady who was often at the library, stopped him. "Oh, you can give me the books, and I'll check them out for you, Ron," she said quietly. "No thanks, Miss Fielding," Ron said. "I'm going to do it all by myself." But Ron, she started to say. Ron was already on his way to the front desk, and he put his books on the counter. "I'd like to check these out, please," said Ron. The desk clerk didn't look at him. Didn't she hear me, Ron wondered? Ron knew what he had to do. Now, just so you get what's going on here, she's intentionally ignoring him because black children were not allowed to check out books, so she's just ignoring him. I agree. But Ron knew what he had to do, and look what Ron did. He jumped up on the counter. He wanted the desk clerk to know that he was serious. "I'd like to check out these books, please," he said quietly. At first, the desk clerk and Miss Scott just looked at each other. "You know you can't check out books, Ron," said Mrs. Scott. "Now you can read them here. That's the rule. Only white people can check out books from the library." Ron looked at Mrs. Scott and the desk clerk politely, but he would not budge. "I always read them here. Today, I want to check them out," Ron said. Mrs. Scott and the desk clerk did not know what to do. Ron wouldn't get off the counter. People started staring. Finally, the desk clerk called the Lake City police. I'm afraid there are some people who still think that way.
And I wish they would disappear out of this existence.
2 policemen came right over. "Let someone check out the books for you, son," said one of the policemen. "You know the rules." But Ron just shook his head. He would not budge. Now Mrs. Scott called Ron's mother. Ms. McNair came to the library very quickly. "I know how you feel, baby," she said, "but you have to follow the rules." "I can't, Mama. It's wrong. The rules are not fair. Why can't I check out books like everyone else?" No one said anything. Not the desk clerk, not Mrs. Scott, not the policeman, not even Ron's mother. I mean, what could they say? It was obvious the rule was unfair. Miss Scott looked at Ron. She thought about all the times that Ron came to the library and all the times he sat at the tables for hours, licking over so many books. He was her best customer. She knew what she had to do. Let's see what she did. Mrs. Scott went into her office and started writing. Ron wondered what she was doing. Mrs. Scott returned and handed Ron a library card. His library card. Ron looked at Mrs. Scott and smiled. And as he jumped to the floor, he thought he saw her smile too. "I'd like to check out these books, please," he said, handing the card to the desk clerk. The desk clerk took his library card, stamped the cards in the back of the books, and said, "These books are due back in 2 weeks." Do you remember those days? Ron smiled. "Thank you," he said. He took the books under his arm and took his mother's hand, and together they walked home. Ron couldn't wait to get to his room and open to page 1, the end. Now, just to let you know who Ron McNair is, Ron McNair wanted to be a pilot, so he went to college and graduate school and learned to be a pilot, and then he became an astronaut, the second black astronaut in American history. And his last mission was on board the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986. Now, why did I choose this story to tell? It's because later on I'm going to talk about, with the adults, I'm going to talk about this word spirituality. What does it mean to be spiritual? Well, I think it means to be spiritual. I think it means to be a fully developed human being, to fully develop our human qualities that make us most human. And I think Ron McNair exemplified several of those qualities. For instance, well, I should say this first of all. You know, to get in shape physically, we got to exercise. We got to get fit, get our muscles fit. Oh, you guessed it. I'll get there in a minute. And to develop our souls, we need to exercise our spiritual muscles. And one of them is curiosity. Being curious, asking questions, wanting to learn the answers to things, because that's what keeps us learning and growing. And Ron McNair was extremely curious. He wanted to learn about airplanes and how to be a pilot. And that curiosity eventually led him to become an astronaut. But it takes curiosity to really grow up and get our soul muscles in shape, because that's what urges us to learn and grow. And not just, we think of learning and growing as for people your age, but no matter if you're 9 or 90, we always have something else to learn, and we can always grow. So curiosity is a soul muscle to exercise. Another one's the one you mentioned, courage. Ron McNair exemplified courage. Think about the courage it took for him to break the rules of segregation and to jump up on that counter and demand his right to be treated equally like everyone else, even in the face of the librarian trying to dissuade him, and the police even, and his mother. But he wouldn't, because he knew he was standing up for what is right. It takes courage to do what's right sometimes. Now, sometimes we think courage means not being afraid. But courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing what's right in spite of your fear. It's okay to be nervous and afraid and anxious. Being courageous means acting anyway for what's right. And we know Ron was nervous, but he stood up for what's right. Now, another quality he exercised, one of his soul muscles, was the quality of respect. Think about how easy it would have been for Ron to get angry and lose his temper. He was being treated unfairly. They wouldn't let him check out books. Everybody was trying to dissuade him from doing what he was doing. He could have started stomping his feet and yelling and screaming and losing his temper, but he didn't. He treated everyone he dealt with respect. And that's the neat thing about respect is it's not dependent on other people. Even if someone treats us with disrespect, they're not our teacher. We can still treat them with respect. And why do we do that? Because they're human beings. And all human beings have dignity and worth and deserve respect, even when they don't act respectful. And another benefit of respect is when we treat others with respect, we enhance our self-respect. We respect ourselves more. Ron McNair was exercising his respect muscles. One more quality I want to point out that Ron McNair had, and that was the quality of selflessness. Selflessness. You know, it's easy in life to become selfish, to think only about what we want, what we desire, what we need, and forget what everyone else needs and wants. But Ron McNair wasn't that kind of person. By demanding that library card, he wasn't doing it just for himself. He was doing it for all black citizens of Lake City. Selflessness is another soul muscle that we can learn to exercise. Well, as a result of Ron McNair's efforts, today the Lake City Library is called the Ron McNair Library. So, I just want you to remember, no matter how young or how old you are, we can always exercise our soul muscles because we can always become a more fully developed human being. And that's a journey that never ends. Well, I'm glad to be with you this morning. And Deborah's going to tell you what's happening next with you guys.
Thank you. Now, children and youth, we invite you to religious exploration. You will be sung out of the sanctuary, then meet group leaders in the foyer or Sandberg Hall and go to classes together. Look for the adults holding a sign with your grade to find your group. Parents, if you are new or visiting today, please escort your children to their class to meet the group leaders and find out where to pick up your child after worship. In the center of our lives and in the center of our service and in the center of our lives, let us pause to honor the silences of the world. Let us open our hearts to the silent prayer for the healing of pain, that place of quiet and the soft, gentle coming of love. Let us share a moment of silence. Now is the time for acknowledging our joys or sorrows with a candlelighting ritual. If you're in the sanctuary, please feel free to come forward to light a candle. If you are online, please write in the chat box any joys or sorrows that you would like to share with the congregation. If you have shared a joy, know that we rejoice with you. If you have shared a sorrow, know that you are held in love and care in this community. Thank you, Les. Wow, that was beautiful. So our topic today is spirituality, and I thought I would share just a little bit of my spiritual journey, which basically was kind of in 4 significant events. So starting as a child, I didn't go to church. My parents didn't go to church, but I always kind of wanted to believe in something. But the concept that I understood people who went to church believed was that there was this traditional white male God sitting up there in judgment over people. And even as a child, I couldn't figure out if I couldn't stand by and watch someone burn in hell forever, how could this all-powerful, all-knowing, loving God do that? It made no sense to me. So I just went through my life. So that was part 1. Part 2, I found myself 39 years old, recently separated from my husband, raising a 2-year-old. And I realized I needed something. I needed something to help me through that. And so I started reading spiritual texts. I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle and started going to a Unity church. And that was really, really good, both for me and for my daughter. And then, fast forward 10 years from then, it's 2006, and I'm moving from my home in Portland, Oregon, to Vienna, Virginia, all the way across the country, don't know a soul other than a few coworkers, no family there. So again, I think, okay, need to find a community. And by then I had a partner, and he coincidentally had been going to Unity Church also. So we went to the Unity Church in Vienna, Virginia, and it just didn't feel like a good fit. But right across the street was a UU church. So we went there, and boy, that first day, I still remember, I was sitting out there just like you all are, and they started talking about the caring committee, and I thought, wow, I could call someone and they would come help me? Wow, what a great concept. And so we joined that church, and it was such a good fit. And the thing that stood out to me with respect to this topic is the fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, because I still feel like I want to keep growing, I want to keep learning. I don't understand how I could take a specific set of beliefs and just carry them through my whole life. I want to keep learning and growing, so the UU Church has felt like a really good fit for me, and so when we came to Asheville, we looked up the UU Church, and that was step 4, and here we are, and I'm so glad to be here. And that's my journey, and now Reverend Dr. Neil Jones is going to talk to you more about spirituality.
So yes, this morning I would like to share my definition of spirituality. But before doing so, I should say to any visitors who are not Unitarian Universalists that when UU ministers speak from the pulpit, we're not speaking on behalf of Unitarian Universalism or the denomination or even the congregation. Every member of a UU congregation can think and speak for themselves. As a minister, just like every other member here, I'm sharing with you my understanding and my perspective based on my experience. In the Unitarian congregation, we learn from each other. And this minister is as much a student as a teacher. So my understanding of spirituality, like my understanding of anything else, is not definitive because I'm speaking for myself. Though my perspective may very well represent one of a great variety of perspectives you're likely to find in a UU congregation, which in my mind is the brilliance of Unitarian Universalism. And neither is my understanding final, for I suspect that my understanding will keep changing as I hopefully keep learning and growing. Now, it's become popular these days for many people to claim that they are spiritual but not religious. What does that mean? At one time, being spiritual and being religious were practically synonymous. But spiritual and religious are getting divorced from each other these days, as more and more Americans identify themselves as religiously non-affiliated, the famous nuns, who now represent a quarter of all Americans, and a third of those younger than 30. They are the fastest growing religious group in America, if you can call them religious. I understand spirituality as our capacity to connect with that which is greater than ourselves. Now, the more traditionally religious among us might use the word God to describe that something greater, whereas we humanist types prefer words such as humanity, life, the world, or the universe. Spirituality is the largest perspective by which we understand ourselves, others, our world, and life itself. And this transcendent connection gives us a sense of purpose and meaning, as well as a context for developing our values and ethics. Now, some people's sense of transcendence is large as all of humanity, all living beings, the planet, the universe, life itself. While some people's sense of transcendence doesn't extend very far beyond themselves, perhaps no further than their own family, their ethnic group, their religion, or their nation. In my understanding, spirituality is innate and universal. Everyone is born with the capacity for self-transcendence, a capacity that is refracted through one's religion, culture, gender, ethnicity, family dynamics, personality, and life experiences, which explains the great variety of spiritual expressions and experiences across humanity. Now, spirituality is a slippery term because it's extremely subjective and personal. Whenever I ask anyone, what do you mean by spiritual or spirituality? I get a different answer from every person. In fact, spirituality may be the most personal thing about us. When we refer to someone's spirit or soul, we're referring to the essence of who a person is, the core of their being. Spirit means breath. The Bible portrays God as bringing Adam to life by breathing into him. Like our breathing, our spirituality animates our lives by centering, organizing, and defining who we are. Now, religion is a group's organized expression of spirituality with all the trappings of history and tradition, beliefs and doctrines, rituals and ceremonies, sacred writings and ecclesiastical authorities. But spirituality is deeper and broader than any particular religious tradition. Just as a bucket of seawater can give us a taste of the ocean but cannot contain the ocean, no religion can express all of spirituality. And any religion which claims to be the only way to truth is being presumptuous and arrogant, in my opinion. That's why I appreciate Unitarian Universalism's embrace of all religious, philosophical, and spiritual paths, as audacious as that attempt may be. Now, I realize that some of us humanist types are squeamish about that word spiritual. But none of us should be afraid of that word because it's not about divinity. It's about humanity, your humanity and mine. It's about fulfilling our capacity to be human. The traditional use of the word salvation implies that something needs to be imparted to us from beyond us to our human nature. I'm interested in the original meaning of words, and the word salvation shares the same root as the word salve, an ointment that brings healing and wholeness. Our salvation does not require any additives. Everything necessary for our growth and development into whole human beings is implanted within us. The seeds of our humanity are like seeds in the ground. The potential needs only the right conditions for growth to occur. So, what are some of these capacities with which we are born and which, if developed, will enable us to get beyond ourselves? I'd like to suggest a few this morning, 8 to be exact. It's by no means an exhaustive list, but I do believe it to be an essential list of what it means to be spiritual, which is to say, what it means to be human. Number 1, the capacity for reverence. Now, typically reverence is associated with belief in God, but it need not be. The capacity for reverence is the sense of mystery and awe one feels about the universe and life and one's own life. Many of us have felt that sense while standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon, or in the delivery room when our child was born, or staring up at a canopy of glittering stars on a dark night, or into the eyes of someone who loves us with all their heart. A sense of reverence is awareness that life is grand and wonderful, far beyond our imagination and comprehension. It's knowing that though I am small, finite, and limited, I am part of something so much bigger than I. Now, we you use can sometimes be dismissive of emotion, but the capacity for reverence is primarily the ability to feel deeply. Number 2, the capacity for gratitude. Gratitude is an awareness that this awe-inspiring universe and people past and present provide us with what we need to live and flourish. Life has given us gifts that we have neither earned nor deserved. Indeed, life itself is a gift. Our parents have conceived us. Friends and family have supported us. Teachers and books have taught us. Art and music have inspired us. Plants and animals have given their lives for our nourishment. The air fills our lungs. The sun warms our planet. Gratitude is the capacity to recognize that none of us would be here if not for the contributions of someone or something else. It's a recognition that we are ultimately dependent, a truth that runs counter to the American myth of the self-made person who pulls themselves up by their own bootstraps, the rugged individualist who has gotten where they are by their own brains and brawn, the self-reliant person who doesn't need anyone. Traditional religion uses the word grace, which shares the same Latin root as the word gratitude, to refer to God's unmerited favor. Again, we need not believe in God in order to feel grateful for life's giftedness. Number 3, the capacity for stewardship. Now, in church, stewardship has become synonymous with the pledge drive, but it's a word with much richer connotations. An awareness that this universe as a whole and this planet in particular sustain us leads to a feeling of obligation to protect the earth and preserve its resources and its beauty. It also leads to a feeling of obligation to be a responsible steward of one's own personal resources, one's property and possessions, time and talent, body and mind. An obligation to share these gifts for the betterment of others and society as a whole, not just merely for our own self-enhancement. The capacity for stewardship is the ability to see ourselves as custodians, which runs counter to capitalism's pressure to cast us as mere consumers who regard the earth as providing a limitless supply of goodies to devour, exploit, buy, and accumulate. Such a truncated view of ourselves and our planet is leading to the earth's destruction and will lead inevitably to our own. For as Chief Seattle wisely put it, the earth doesn't belong to us. We belong to the earth. Everything is connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. Number 4, the capacity for self-worth. Now, most of the universe is inanimate matter, but you and I have been gifted with the privilege of being alive. And whatever the duration or condition of that privilege, life is a privilege nonetheless, which makes our lives valuable and meaningful. An awareness of this privilege leads to a recognition of our dignity and worth as human beings. The capacity for self-worth is the ability to realize that even though we may have shortcomings and make mistakes and have a lot of growing up to do, we are fundamentally good because life is good and we are alive. To use a biblical image, it's the capacity to hold two truths simultaneously. We are dust and we are the image of God. This awareness of our basic goodness runs counter to the old doctrine of original sin, which holds that human beings are fundamentally defective and need a Savior. Our Unitarian ancestors rightfully rejected this debilitating belief. Number 5, the capacity for love. The ability to recognize our own dignity and worth is inseparably tied to our ability to recognize the dignity and worth of others, for we share our humanity. It may sound trite, but it's true. We can love others only insofar as we can love ourselves, and we can love ourselves only insofar as we're able to love others. People who cannot abide others who are greedy, for example, expose their inability to tolerate their own tendencies toward greed. Or likewise, someone who is driven by perfectionism can be expected to be as judgmental of the imperfection of others as they are of their own imperfections. Love of others and self-love are really one and the same capacity. A well-developed capacity for love extends to both others and oneself what love and dignity deserve: honesty, trustworthiness, kindness, patience, respect, generosity, and forgiveness. Number 6, the capacity for justice. A well-developed capacity for love inevitably leads to a desire for justice. Or in the words of Dr. Cornel West, justice is what love looks like in public. If you truly love others, you realize it's not enough to give them roses and chocolates. You must give them a social system which treats them with the dignity and equality that all human beings deserve. You must give them a political system which provides them with a seat of government, a seat of self-government, regardless of their socioeconomic status. You must give them an economic system which, in the words of Dr. King, doesn't take necessities from the masses in order to give luxuries to the classes. We are not individuals who live in isolation from each other. For better or worse, whether we like each other or not, we live in community. Or in the words of Dr. King, again, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. A well-developed capacity for justice takes responsibility for the human environment, which forms or deforms the human beings within it. I'm always surprised and disappointed when Unitarians, of all people, ask me what social action has to do with spirituality, as if the two are mutually exclusive. The pursuit of justice is not the absence of spirituality. It is its fulfillment. Number 7, the capacity for creating meaning. Squirrels, as far as we know, don't pause in the midst of gathering nuts and ask, what's the meaning and purpose of my life? The question of meaning and purpose is a distinctly human question, and it is a challenge for all of us. Now, some religious people may think that they're off the hook in answering this question because, in their way of thinking, God has a master plan for the entire universe. Even if that were true, believers must still discern God's will for their lives. Whether or not you believe that the universe has meaning, you must still figure out the meaning and purpose of your life. Ironically, this capacity to define meaning is not developed by asking, what is the meaning of life? It's not a question to be asked, but to be lived. The meaning of life is discovered in and through the experience of living. For many people, life is made meaningful by their close relationships, particularly their families and friends. Many would agree with Henry Nouwen. There's no reason to live if there's nobody to live for. Many live for their work. The biblical book of Genesis describes work as a curse. But for those of us who take pride in our work, who gain a sense of mastery and competency through our jobs, who feel that we're making a contribution to the lives of others, work feels more like a vocation than an occupation. Many define their life's meaning through their service to the larger community, through making this world a better place than they found it. And many find meaning in savoring the gifts of life and relishing the small pleasures that are easy to overlook. The aroma of a fresh cup of coffee, the crispness and coolness of clean sheets on the bed, the delight of a child's laughter, the orange glow of a setting sun. The more we immerse ourselves in life, the less the question of meaning matters, because the living of our lives answers the question for us. And number 8, the capacity for living with mortality. We humans are also the only animals who are haunted by an awareness of our mortality. Like the question of meaning, the issue of mortality is extremely personal. It's not simply knowing that all living creatures will die. It's knowing that I will die. Something that many of us would rather not think about. I'm always amused by the certainty of some preachers that there is life after death. Some can describe the conditions of heaven and hell as vividly as the furniture in their living room. Wouldn't it be more honest to admit what we know and what we don't know? And wouldn't it demonstrate more integrity to make only promises we know we can keep? What we do know with certainty is that there is life before death. And this one life of which we know is made all the more meaningful because of our awareness that it will end. Or, as the therapist Irvin Yalom put it, although the physicality of death destroys us, the idea of death saves us. Without a deadline, no pun intended, without a deadline, we postpone what we need to do. A deadline gives us a sense of urgency. And death, the ultimate deadline, gives our lives a sense of preciousness. I'm reminded each time a friend or acquaintance dies that we dare not fritter away this present moment, because it may very well be the only moment we have. We should savor the sweetness of the simple pleasures precisely because they do not last. We should be more fully present with others because they will not always be around. We should be more fully present with ourselves, being more authentic and less pretentious. We should put first things first and last things last. We should worry less and live more. A well-developed capacity for living in the shadow of death enables us to live as if our lives were not mere dress rehearsals. As far as we know, this is the one and only performance. So, in my way of thinking, these are just some of the capacities that represent our spirituality. Now, clearly, all persons are at different points in the process of developing these capacities. Some come to see life as a gift, while others experience life as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, to quote Hobbes. Those whose basic needs have been met in life are likely to feel gratitude. They're more likely to feel gratitude than those who have been deprived. Those who have been shamed or abused may not come to recognize their own dignity and worth or that of others. To be born with the capacity does not guarantee that the conditions of life will favor its development. Genetics, family of origin, geography, socioeconomic status can deal us a promising or problematic hand, to say nothing of the cards we deal ourselves through our own choices in life. Another trite but true statement is that life can be unfair and unkind. The ethical challenge for you and me is to make this life fairer and kinder, so that all persons have the opportunity to realize their full capacities as human beings, to be spiritual, whether they're religious or not. Amen. And let us stand now for our closing hymn, number 6, Just As Long As I Have Breath. Oh, did I skip something? No. Did I skip something?
The visitors.
Still
We don't have it memorized, apparently.
Can we skip a slide?
Here you go. We have to do it the old-fashioned way.
Do we not have the last two slides? Page 6.
Page 6.
Oh, good job, everybody. We're learning to be flexible. This is the time in our service when we welcome visitors. So if we have any visitors, we invite you to stand and wait for the microphone. Tell us your name and where you're visiting from. Welcome.
Hey y'all, my name is Kat. I'm visiting from Candler.
Welcome.
Angelina from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Welcome.
My name is Olivia. We just moved here from Boston.
Welcome.
My name is Virginia. I'm visiting from Berkeley, California.
I'm Mary Ann, and I'm here from Mainline Unitarian Church near Philadelphia.
Welcome.
I'm Pat Ballinger from Bay City, Texas.
Welcome.
And I'm Vicki Matthews from Bay City, Texas.
I'm Laura. I'm a member of Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church in Carrollton, Texas, in the Dallas area, outside Dallas.
Welcome.
Is this working? Yeah. What's that? Oh, like that. Okay. I'm Flower. I just moved to Black Mountain from Maryland.
Welcome.
I'm Neil Jones. I'm not a visitor, I'm a member, but I have a personal plea for help. I'm to do a wedding service out of town next weekend. I need a ride to the airport on Friday morning. I'm serious. If someone, and it's not too early, so don't fret, if someone can take me to the airport, I would really appreciate it. Please get in contact with me. Thank you. Thank you.
Our announcements run as slides at the beginning of the service. If you missed them, just refer to Wednesday's weekly e-news as everything is described there. If you don't receive the e-news, ask an usher to show you how to sign up. Our community plate partner this month is the Minister's Discretionary Fund. Okay. You can contribute by writing.
I have my son home. We are standing for love. And we will always
Standing for love.
standing
Yes.
for love.
Yes. Standing for love. That's what we do. You can contribute by writing community plate in the memo line of your check. You can also donate online. Today's offering will now be collected and gratefully received. If this is your first time here, please let the collection plate pass you by. This service is our gift to you, and your presence is your gift to us. For the gifts of your time, presence, talents, and treasure, we are grateful.
Our closing words are also from Frederick Buechner, who said, "If I were called upon to state in a few words the essence of everything I was trying to say as a novelist and as a minister, it would be something like this. Listen to your life. See it for the fathomless mystery that it is. In the boredom and pain of it, no less than in the excitement and gladness. Touch, taste, smell your way to the holy and hidden heart of it, because in the last analysis, all moments are key moments, and life itself is grace." Amen. And Les has invited us to stay for sing-along postlude at the very end, This Little Light of Mine, at the very end of the service.
Thank you.